Welcome to Swarf and Chips, hopefully the last one where I can't be accompanied by members of my team. So, coming up in this week's show, we are focusing solely on Ward Hi-Tech, a machine tool supplier based in Sheffield, providing a wide range of machining solutions to industry, as you'll find out in the next 20 minutes, including a machine that can cut aluminium, steel, duplex, in fact, any material. So, Paul, you led this one. Why should our viewers stick around?
Yeah, definitely worth sticking around. 4 different machines, all different technologies and all cutting. But also what we're going to be discussing is the commercial flexibility that Ward Hi-Tech are currently offering, not just on one of their products, but in fact, all of them. All coming up in this week's Swarf and Chips.
So today I'm joined by Paul and Joe. So Joe, how are you doing?
I'm doing really good, thanks, Linz. Thank you for asking. I hope all is well with you and your family. But yeah, no, everything's good at Welsh HQ. We're as busy as we've ever been and what have you. So yeah, all good.
And Paul, how are you?
Yeah, good. Really good. We've been out and about, obviously, recently. Not that frequently, but we've started to get back onto the road. Had a good week last week, visiting companies such as Star. In fact, with yourself, the University of Nottingham. And in fact, that will be coming up on next week's Swarf and Chips. And also Matsura more recently. So we're starting to get back to a little bit of normality, which is good news.
Yeah, definitely. And I think when we were out filming, we didn't realise, and you don't realise it already, but we are quite naturally quite far away from another. You have to do different things, but cleaning of equipment and everything, it felt quite normal actually. So, Anyway, right, first up, the QTech lathe.
Now, the first machine I'm going to talk to you about this week, or we're going to discuss on this Ward Hi-Tech takeover show, is this one. This Huachon machine behind us, which is a Y-axis turning centre, is running a great demonstration here today. Now, this is the 230A YMC, a mill drill with that Y-axis. What's special about this machine? I'll touch on a few points before we take it back to the studio. But here we have a turret, which is a 12-station turret. It's got 24-point indexing. So if you wanted to you can get two boring bar or a double boring bar holder, a double turning tool holder, which means those 24-point positions means you've got a lot more flexibility in what you do with your turret. That's one aspect. The second one for me is this tailstock. Now this is actually this is a hydraulic tailstock. So sometimes we see the drag and drop method, but there's not much, or should we say, if you have a servo or a hydraulic tailstock, you've got more control, and you can it's more sensitive to where it's being positioned, and it's also a lot faster. So if you're changing components frequently and using the tailstock, there is an advantage there too. Now this is a 65 mil bar machine. The third point I wanted to pick up on, and I'm sure we'll talk about this in more detail back at the studio, is the P-type motor. Now this motor means that you've got full power, would you believe, from 500 RPM. So if you were doing more harder materials, if you were doing parts that required heavier cuts on more difficult materials, but also machining some aluminiums and some higher speed type materials, the machine can handle both. So there we have it. This is available, in fact, from stock here at Ward Hi-Tech. They've got some fantastic commercial terms on these machines, which I'm sure we'll talk about in more detail later on in the show. But as for now, this is the Hi-Tech 230A YMC.
Interesting machine there, Paul. So what's the deal with this FANUC motor and the tailstock?
Well, the P motor is a FANUC product which gives you kind of the best available of both worlds. Now, when you're looking at a machine, sometimes when you select a machine, you'll either want extreme power, because you'll want that at the low end in order to be able to take heavier cuts on maybe harder materials. But then also you might want speed to be turning aluminium, 6,000-7,000 RPM. And you may want a bit of power at that end as well. Sometimes people say that there's a compromise and you can't have both, but the P motor is the best way of kind of bridging that gap. And it's an important factor on this particular machine, because it gives you more flexibility in what you're actually making.
Right, and then Joe, the machine, it's got a 24-point indexing turret. So how important is this?
Yeah, it adds to the flexibility of the machine, doesn't it? Obviously, you're increasing the amount of tools you can hold. That's not to say you're going to use all 24, but when you're talking about driven tool lathes and things like that, but having that half-point index in 24 instead of 12, I think it's I think it's a big saving. That's Paul's already mentioned it, but the other things to consider, I like the fact that you get full power from 500 RPM on this machine. So if you are at low revs doing in-canal and some of the heat-resistant alloys, it's going to be good. It's going to be good. And the other thing I like is you've got plus or minus 60 millimeters on the y-axis, and watch and do say that's class leading. It's the biggest stroke in its class. So it's a good machine.
Yeah, definitely.
I think
really
I would also add, Lindsay, you mentioned about the tailstock. Sometimes when you move a tailstock in and out of operations, you can't judge very well how much pressure you're putting onto the component. But by using this servo-driven one, it gives you that ability as well. And as Joe correctly said, the bigger the capacity of the machine and the smaller the footprint, then it's much more advantageous. So altogether, a very neat and tidy, compact machine, and of course available on some fantastic commercial terms, which I'm sure we'll touch on throughout the show.
Yeah, a bit later on. Right, okay, so next up, this is basically a monster of a machine. And no, I'm not talking about you, Joe, so check out this SFM lathe.
Now behind me, this is the biggest machine you're going to see on Swarf and Chips today here from Ward High Tech. This is an SFM turning centre. As with the theme of the show, what we want to do, or what I'm going to do, is pick out a couple of the points that have been of interest to me here looking at this machine. First of which is they're doing something on here called prime turning. We'll talk about that in more detail as well, away from this cut. But this particular SFM machine has two chucks on it. Has a chuck on the out the back of the machine and a chuck in the machine, both of which are 4-jaw independent chucks, manually clamped, which means that when you're doing bigger shafts like this, to have two chucks supporting the component does certainly give you a more stable working environment. Very impressive to see that here, and in fact very impressive to see this prime turning. Now this machine is 5 meters in length. This is a 5-meter machine. They do go up to 6 meters with SFM. This has got an 8-station turret on here. It's got the Fanuc series OI control, but look at the door access on here, the kind of concertina door motion. You've also got a one-piece casting on this machine, and in fact up to 6 meters the beds are one-piece castings. You've got swarf extraction at the back and at the front here, and you have quite impressive boring bar holders, which will put a cutaway over the screen, which can be put onto the saddle of the machine, which then will enable you to hold those longer boring bars and do those longer boring operations. Very popular machine for Ward High Tech, this SFM. Great for the oil and gas sector, great for those longer shafts, those bigger parts, and as you can see here, this is actually a trial they're doing for a customer. Very versatile offering on a big machine, because you don't have to have a turret, you can have a tool post. But yeah, we'll pick this one back up in the studio and maybe touch more on the prime turning element.
Joe, you're not really a monster. I was only joking. Now, can you tell us about the machine, but the prime turning?
Yeah, so if we talk about prime turning, it's a Sandvik Coromant product. And essentially what we're doing, it's multi-directional turning. So traditionally we would turn from the turret to the chuck to remove the material. But what you can do with prime turn, you can do it both ways, or more importantly, for shaft work, you would start at the chuck and you would remove the material towards the turret. And you may ask why? Why do I need to do that? Well, the benefits are increased tool life, 50% increased productivity. And it's basically because the chip thinning process and the approach angle of the insert is greater than the traditional methods. It's not for every job, in truth. It's not going to be part of every turning process you have. But for shaft work, it's absolutely brilliant. It really is. And as I say, there's many, many advantages.
Yeah, basically, you're telling us ways that it can save you money, in essence.
Exactly. In that machine, 5 to 6 meter bed, all at a single piece casting. That's a big old casting, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. It's huge. Now, Paul, have you got any more about the whole range, the SFM range?
Yeah, I mean, I'd firstly concur with what Joe said about the turning. That the cut that was being performed there was for a customer. It was a trial that was going on, and I think one of the as Joe said about the less tool wear and all the rest of it, but the fact that if you've got a long shaft you can turn up one way and then turn back the other way, of course there's time savings there as well. Interesting to see that they were doing that dry, which I'm assuming is obviously possible with prime turning, and it is a great innovation. But the machine itself, big heavy duty. That one, as you see, had 2 chucks on it, so you can support more firmly shafts of that size by clamping it at the back with an independent forge or and inside the machine. Ward Hi-Tech doing unbelievably well with their SFM range in the oil country industry, but certainly up north as well for heavy engineering. It is a phenomenal piece of kit, and there is a big range up to 1 metre chucking diameter as well. So plenty of options with the machines.
All right, brilliant. And we'll be talking about the financial options a little bit later on. So next up is the Vesta VMC, a 3-axis machine. And if 3 is not enough, then stick around, because later on in the show, we've got a stonker of a 5-axis machine from Dahlih, the DMX 320.
Yeah, next up I'm going to talk to you about this Vesta machine, this Vesta 1000 behind me here. Now this machine is actually a 12,000 RPM spindle, 1 metre in the x-axis, but I want to talk to you about the daylight distance between the spindle nose and the table, 630mm. 80mm you can get that spindle nose from the table, which compared to a lot of 3-axis machining centres gives you an advantage when you're doing thinner parts. You don't want to have to be putting huge fixtures on the machine. You can actually reach them quite easily with this spindle. The tool changer on here as well. You've got 2 speeds. You can actually change the tools at high speed, 1.6 seconds tool to tool time, or you can slow it down for those bigger tools as well. Now on our global channel, earlier in the year we were at Stillfab in Dubai, and we looked at this machine as well as the Vesta 2000, a much bigger, heavier machine. This is a BT40, it's a 12,000 direct drive spindle, it's a quick machine, it's a powerful machine, and it's available here from stock.
Interesting video there, Paul, but my question to you is, with the tool changes, what's the benefit of having the 2 speeds and then having the larger tool and the smaller tool?
I think, it just comes down to flexibility, really. I mean, if you, as an example, if you were tool changing a probe, you might not want to do it in 1.7 seconds just because of the stylus and the mechanics in the probe. Whereas if you were going and looking for a high-speed machining operation and just going from 1 end mill to a drill, you want to change it as fast as possible. So you can do that, you can control it. I think it's just that element of flexibility which is the advantage. Other things with the machine, as you saw there, I like the way that you can have a footprint where you can have a conveyor out the back as opposed to the side. Just means it keeps the machine more compact. You know, the inline 12,000 spindle, all driven by a FANUC control. But as I mentioned in there, having that gap as well, or that smaller as possible gap from the spindle nose to the bed, means you don't need to fixture plate components up. So really, I suppose what we're seeing here with this Vesta machine is lots of flexibility. But Joe, when you look at as a cutting tool specialist, when you look at machines, are things like that advantageous in your opinion?
100%. When you look at the Vesta VMC 1000 plus, I think this model was, it stands on a grey cast iron bed with a cross table design. It's a sturdy machine, but it also has dynamic linear guideways in all axes. So what that offers you, the rigidity that's required in the machining process, but obviously you've got the dynamic linear as well. But yeah, and the other thing I note, maximum feed rate of 24 meters. To me, that lends itself to somebody machining aluminium, doing trochoidal milling, where radial depths of cut are quite low and you're running fast. And also the mold and die. These mold and die tools are up to 15, 18, 20 meters a minute now. So this machine, it does look a good machine to me. It's not one I see a great deal of, in truth, but when I looked into it, it looks a good option, good solution.
Yeah, I think both of you sound very impressed. So to conclude, we look at this 5-axis special offer. So Joe, before we watch Paul talk about the machine and how important it is to not only buy the right machine, but also get the great kind of commercial terms of it, but like what Ward Hi-Tech are offering, I know it will massively help companies right now too, but how do Ward Hi-Tech afford to be able to look after customers in such a way?
Well, to be honest with you, I think negotiate a good deal. I think it's essential now. It's essential, like it's always been. There is a limit. Paul negotiates with Starbucks on the price of a coffee. But if we talk about machine tools as a whole, I think it's fair for the supplier to command a decent price for the machine. But equally, it's fair for the end user to negotiate. That's what life's about. But what you do get reward, the machines they create their own deals essentially. So the ones I particularly like are the ones where you don't pay for the machine for a number of months. Why is that advantageous? Well, you can invoice 10, 15, 20, 50,000 pounds worth of work before you've actually started paying for the machine. So you're generating cash rather than it's costing you money from day one. And I think Wards, they do that well. They do that really well, in fact.
Yeah, maybe we'll go on to a little bit more detail about that after this video. So next up, a 5-axis machine. And this one can cut, as I said earlier, aluminium, steel, in fact, any duplex, Inconel, in fact, any material.
Yes, so next up for me, the next machine on the list is this DMX 320 5-axis machine from Dahlih. Now, Ward Hi-Tech have been selling Dahlih machines for many, many years. There is hundreds of their vertical machining centres out in the field in the UK, and also now a lot of 5-axis. This particular model is actually a 4+1 that's available here from stock. It's got a FANUC control on this machine. Impressively, it's got a 15,000 RPM spindle, and it's also got 25 horsepower and 18.5 kilowatts on that spindle. But it's got an electronic gearbox, which means, again, a little bit like we were talking about the power on the Huachon turning centre. This machine can actually achieve full power from 1500 RPM. So again, there's a really good element of versatility there, depending on the types of materials that you want to machine. Often people will buy a machine based around an application. Let's say they're machining aluminium 80% of the time, they'll go for a higher speed spindle that might have less torque at the bottom end. But what happens if they get thrown an Inconel component or some stainless steel or some super duplex? Yeah, they may be able to do it on the machine. But they probably won't do it as effectively and as efficiently as they could on a machine like this if you've got that electronic gearbox on it. The key point about this machine as well, really, from Ward Hi-Tech is what they bring them in with. They come in here as standard with through spindle coolant, swarf conveyors. They're all BBT 40 machines, spindle face and taper. As I mentioned, that powerful high-speed spindle. This has got 40 tools on it. This is an ideal 5-axis machine. Majority of applications we see in industry for 5-axis are 3+2, 4+1. So there's no need often to go for that simultaneous machine. And as we will talk about on the show later on, the commercial terms available here from Ward Hi-Tech are quite incredible at the moment. That's it. Let's take up the topic on this 5-axis and 5-axis machine back in the studio.
Right, so they offer incredible flexible terms, as Joe said, and this is a compelling argument for when they're out, when the sales guys are out on the road and they're visiting engineers. What are your thoughts on this, Paul?
Yeah, very true. Everything Joe said was correct, even the bit about Starbucks. I mean, I don't actually drink coffee as they weren't prepared to budge. So, that's the reason. As for Joe himself, when he tries to negotiate at McDonald's for a discount on his burger, he doesn't go for the monetary value. He just asks for 2 instead. So, he has his own cross to bear, should we say. But I think the commercial flexibility is massively important. As Joe correctly said, in this day and age, we're in and amongst this pandemic. And the way I look at it is the fact that if you were to buy 2 or 3 machines now, I can't agree more with what Joe said. You can be invoicing and making money before you've actually potentially outlaid anything. And Ward Hi-Tech do that as a result of being a business that was founded many, many years ago, and they own all of their machines. So they can be as flexible as they choose. It's got to work for both, and it does work for both, and that's why they're successful. As for that 5-axis machine, the DMX, the Dali machine, a very versatile machine, 4+1, got the FANUC control on it, got the high-speed spindle, and again, the high power spindle as well. 5-axis machining, again, these days, is it the opportunity for an engineer to go from, what he traditionally knows as moving jobs around from machine to machine, or is this the time to go, right, I need a 5-axis machine. I need to be able to get those parts off the machine quicker to compete with my competition, because it's going to become a much more competitive market out there. And if that's the case, why not buy one on great commercial terms and make money out of it before you have to pay?
Yeah, Joe, just my question to you then. You know, being in the situation they're in at Ward Hi-Tech, why would you invest in a machine through them and what are the benefits?
I would urge engineers to take a look. They offer exceptional value, the great machines, as I say, great value and great credit terms. Just go and take a look.
Right, brilliant. Thanks, Jen. So there you have it. What a show. Ward Hi-Tech. Now, they are in a great position to offer security in your machine purchase. Now, you'll not only get great terms, you'll also be comforted in the fact that this business carries no debt. They own all of the machines that they sell, and their primary purpose is to support their customers today, tomorrow, and beyond. Now, we have many more reviews on their products on our website. So for more information on Huachon, Dali or SFM, visit MTD or wardhitech.co.uk. Now, guys, a final word from each of you. We can see, Paul, on our flagship show, you've made such an effort and had a shave today for us, haven't you?
As ever, but I'm sure I'll need to even more in the up and coming days because we are starting to be out and about again. Looking forward to the launch of the Vulcan machines at ETG on Tuesday. Be tuned in to Facebook and YouTube. Tuned into mtdcnc.com at 12:30 on Tuesday to see the all new Vulcan range.
I'm looking forward to it. And Joe, of course, you're growing your beard, so you're fine.
Yeah, no, I will have a little shave before Tuesday probably, but yeah, no, I can't wait. Looking forward to it, and let's try and get back to some sort of normal.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, gents. And as we always say at the end of the show, keep those spindles turning.
Spindles turning.